Jedi Squadron is a podcast run by the Anime Secrets website. Check us out at animesecrets.org for more anime, video game, tokusatsu, and now Star Wars content. Remember to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts today.
Hello, new Padawans, and welcome to the Jedi Squadron podcast. Here, you will be taking lessons in the many pieces of the Star Wars universe, whether it be the movies, animated series, video games, comics, and etc. This is your training into becoming a Star Wars fan as part of the Jedi Squadron. May your training go well, and may the Force be with you, young Padawans. What is going on, Star Wars Nation? This is the Jedi Squadron podcast presented by animesecrets.org. I'm your host, Nathan Desa, and I have Riz, my co-host, on. Say hey, Riz.
Hey, Riz, what's up?
You always do.
That joke will never get old.
No, it won't.
I feel like I'm already a dad, but I'm not. Because that's a prime dad joke.
Mm-hmm. So, today we are going to be doing our first big, Star Wars media review. I've reviewed my fair share of novels, and I have a bunch more on the way for you guys, just so you know. We are going to be reviewing season 1 of Rebels, and we're trying to review all 4 seasons ahead of the new Ahsoka premiere. Now, before we get started, I do want to stress something in light of a recent event that has happened in the world. As most of you know, both the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild, both major unions for actors and writers in Hollywood, they have both gone on strike. And we want to stress that we here at Anime Secrets and we here on the Jedi Squadron podcast, we fully support the writers and actors who are going through this strike 100%. We are completely behind them. This is not made to promote Hollywood content. We are doing this to voice our support and appreciation for our favorite voice actors here, and also our favorite writers who brought us this amazing Star Wars content. But we do want to stress that we support those who are on the strike 100%, and we will continue to support them for however long these strikes may last. We wanted to stress that.
Yeah, definitely. And just to kind of add on to that, as of right now, there is no call by SAG-AFTRA or the Writers Guild for us to put a stop on content creation as long as we're not being sponsored. And it's very safe to say that Nathan and I are not being sponsored to do any of this stuff. This is all a pure hobby for us. It's a labor of passion and love.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else. So we're here to pay homage and tribute to the people who make the worlds that we can live in rent-free for a couple of hours.
Exactly. So we wanted to make that clear, and that doesn't just apply for this podcast. Podcast on the Toku Secrets website. Same thing, same principle applies. But we'll continue to state that at the beginning of all of our podcasts. So, with that being said, let's jump into what I guess is probably Disney's first major media, show/movie, because the season came out like a year before The Force Awakens came out. So this was like Disney's very first big thing after they purchased the Star Wars franchise. To begin, now we are only reviewing season 1. We'll be doing seasons 2, 3, and 4 on some other date. And we're hoping to get them all done. I'm hoping to finish the show. I'm halfway through. Well, actually, a little bit over halfway through season 3 right now. I'm going to be getting it finished before Ahsoka starts, since they've basically confirmed that Ahsoka is just going to be a live-action season 5 of Rebels. So As far
Now,
as
Nathan, one thing to note here, real quick, there is no try. There's only do or do not, and we will do the completion of seasons 1 through 4 of Rebels.
yes, we will,
Okay,
of
just
course.
throwing it out there that Master Yoda would not appreciate us taking the word maybe here and trying and all this
Right.
hesitance.
My
So,
apologies to Master Yoda.
of course.
So, the timeline for this, just to establish where this takes place in canon, its timeline takes place between 5 BBY and 4 BBY. For those who don't know how the Star Wars thing works, BBY stands for Before Battle of Yavin. So basically, 4 to 5, 4 to 5 years before. The events of A New Hope. So that would make that roughly 15 years after the end of the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, this is at a point where, the Clone Wars have long been over. Palpatine and the Galactic Empire, they rule the galaxy. The Empire is the governing force. The Republic is no more. The Empire rules the galaxy. And there's, a group. I don't think by this point the Rebel Alliance completely exists, but it's like, forming like, smaller versions. And what happens is that to kind of sum this up, we're not going to go episode by episode. There are 15 episodes in this season. We're to just kind of give the basic premise of this. We meet our main characters. They are the crew of a starship called the Ghost. They include Kanan Jarrus, who is a human and who is a human. He is a Jedi, a former Jedi, and we'll go more into his backstory later. We have Hera Syndulla, who is a Twi'lek, a Mandalorian human named Sabine, a Lasat named Zeb. He's got his full name I can't remember. It's a little
Zebralius or something. I can't pronounce it.
yeah, and they're accompanied by their astromech droid Chopper. And during one of their missions on the planet Lothal, they encounter a young boy named Ezra Bridger, who gets in their way while they're trying to while they're on one of their missions against the Empire. They recruit Ezra Bridger to join them, since Bridger is he's an orphan. He lost his family at an early age, and he joins them. And they soon find out that Ezra has abilities in the Force, which results in Kanan taking him on to be his apprentice, which is difficult for Kanan because Kanan never actually completed his training. And the rest and most of the series up is just them going through like a series of episodic missions. They frequently clash with an ISB, that's the Imperial Security Bureau, Agent Callus,
Mm-hmm.
and a recurring villain here who actually not kind of a spoiler, he actually dies at the end of this. He is defeated. Is the Grand Inquisitor, because this series establishes that there's a team of dark Jedi that were recruited by Vader to hunt down Jedi and kill them, and we have the Grand Inquisitor, and they Ezra and Kanan frequently have encounters with them. They actually kill him at the end, and at the very end, they come into contact with a bigger group of rebels who are like the early stages of the Rebel Alliance, and they find out that this person who they've been working with this whole time, Fulcrum, is actually Ahsoka Tano,
Dun
Anakin's
dun
Padawan.
dun.
Which, okay, I'll be honest. When I saw that, now I knew it was coming. It wasn't as big for me because keep in mind I had watched all of Clone Wars, including the last season that came on Disney Plus after Rebels had wrapped up. I had seen that season of Clone Wars before I saw Rebels, but I can still, if I looked at it from the perspective of I watched Clone Wars and no, I haven't seen Ahsoka since her last episode in Clone Wars, which is literally the last time we see her, aside from her appearing as a vision for Yoda very briefly at one point.
Hmm.
The last time we see her is when she's walking
Walking away
down
from the
those
temple.
stairs. Yeah, with that sad
Yeah.
music playing.
And see, that's interesting that you have that experience because I have the opposite experience.
Hmm.
So I watched Rebels as it came out, season by season, episode by episode, on Disney XD or whatever it was called.
Yeah, Disney XD.
And when I saw it, there's this huge gap where Ahsoka hadn't really been seen since he walked her from the temple. And there's a lot of interest and wanting to know more about where she had been, what she'd been doing.
Hmm.
And we got a little glimpse of that from the Ahsoka novel, which I highly recommend people to read,
I do too. I've read that
especially
recently.
prior to the Ahsoka TV show coming out. I would call that required reading prior to seeing Ahsoka come out later this year. The same on an unrelated note. We'll get to him when we get to him, but I feel like the Thrawn trilogy is also pretty important for
Are, are you
the
talking
Thrawn.
about the original Thrawn trilogy?
No, the new ones.
Okay. I would like. I haven't read anything past the first one, although the first one I would say is a required reading because
Yeah,
it gives us the basic backstory. The other ones, from what I've read about their plots, you can read them, but they're just like
but they
some.
don't add as much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you
No,
should definitely read the first one.
yeah, definitely. I just heard that second and third are also really well written.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear that they're all well written. It's just the second and third ones are more like, here are some other adventures that Thrawn gets into.
Yeah.
Aren't they awesome? Which is fine, but
I mean, yeah, it's
yeah.
definitely fine. It's just if you want to know more about the characters that you're going to be watching on the big screen come August,
Mhm.
this is the way to do it.
Mhm.
I myself personally am trying to get through all of Rebels and rereading the Ahsoka novel um, because my idea is if I can get through at least that much, then I'll have seen Ahsoka's later stage of life adventure prior to Mando.
Mhm.
And if I get a chance, I might go rewatch the Mando episode and the Book of Boba Fett episode. But I'm not super requiring myself to do that, just because I had seen those pretty recently, like in the last year or two.
Although I do want to say that like a lot of like technically some of the things that appear in the Ahsoka novel you can see in Tales of a Jedi.
Yeah,
Like the whole climax of that novel is one of those shorts in Tales of a Jedi.
yeah. No, that's actually a really good point. I forgot about the Tales of the Jedi.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would try and watch it as well.
But to just kind of go back, I have I guess I'm kind of one of those weird guys when it comes to watching Rebels because most people probably like they watched it when it first came on and then they they were watch and then that show finished and they watched the final season of Clone Wars. I mean, I didn't do that. I mean, I was watching Clone Wars. I read A New Dawn, which is the origin story behind Hera and Kanan, without having. Well, okay, I watched some clips from Rebels. Like there was a time where I was obsessed with watching that brief battle between Obi-Wan and Maul, which we'll get
Yeah,
to at some point. Like I knew I was obsessed with watching that, but like I didn't know anything about the main characters, so I read A New Dawn without knowing anything about what Kanan and Hera are like, and then I finished Clone Wars and then I started watching Rebels. So yeah, I'm kind of I guess you could say I'm one of those weird fans where I wasn't watching it when it first came
yeah.
out.
I'm actually kind of surprised because I don't know. To me, it just seems like you would have, but it makes sense. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Um,
We're on a new software that we're not used to.
yeah, but I would I will say though, like to just kind of talk about some parts, the overall thing about this season. A lot of people say that they don't like season one of Rebels, and I I can see why, but I think, and I'll talk more about this when we go into like the character depth, but I kind of appreciate that I read A New Dawn before I watched this show. 'Cause if you watch my podcast, you'll know that I thought A New Dawn was a good novel. It made me feel like, okay, yeah, I do have to watch Rebels because I liked
Yeah.
Kanan and Hera in that book. I do feel that maybe if I didn't read A New Dawn before that, maybe I wouldn't be as big of a fan. I but I think season one is just okay, but it's got some issues, and uh, but do we want to talk about our favorite moments from season one?
Um, yeah, I just want to wrap up what you're saying with part of what lured me into Rebels so strongly as it did was the fact that it came out as a sequel to Clone Wars. Not a direct sequel, mind you, but like
Mm-hmm.
the the next thing in the historical saga of what's happening between the end of the movies and the start of the next trilogy, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool to add in that world building because honestly, we get a lot of really good stuff here for I'm gonna steal the title, The Spark of Rebellion, episode 1 and 2's title. We
Mm-hmm.
get that in this season. We get the start of the rebellion, and by the end of the season, we do see what's really going on behind the scenes and where we're going next.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely want to move on to favorite moments, Nate. I think I'm going to start off with a funny one, just because I love that Ezra did this. Um, so Ezra didn't have a lightsaber in the beginning, and he had to borrow Kanan's whenever he needed to. And then finally, he went on his own quest, got a kyber crystal, and built a lightsaber. But because Ezra has so much self doubt in himself, he built in a blaster into the lightsaber just to have a safety blanket to give him another way to fight the enemy if he can't, for whatever reason, master lightsaber dueling. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was pretty brilliant because I had never seen or even thought about a lightsaber gun.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty good ingenuity. It gives Ezra something a bit more unique. And overall, I thought it was a pretty cool idea. Um, but yeah, I know. I love Ezra and I love what they did there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say that's probably probably my favorite episode where he gets his kyber crystal and he
Yeah,
makes that lightsaber. I don't know. Disney has been real creative by like some of the like different types of lightsabers that they make. Like the Inquisitor lightsabers are awesome.
yeah,
I
definitely.
So I feel like that's another way how Disney was able to evolve. Like, hey, we can make a lightsaber that's also a gun. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So I mean, that's the thing is that you know, going back a little bit, not much, but when Disney bought the franchise, I feel like when they struck the old canon that is now the extended legacy universe, it gave them a lot of freedom to do some really good stuff, but it also gave us the freedom to do some really bad stuff. I'm looking at you, sequel trilogy.
Yeah,
We'll get there when we get there.
actually, I have. When we get to Rise of Skywalker, I'm going to have a lot of choice words to say. Not because I just recently watched it, but because there's a book that I'm reading currently that fleshes out a lot of the ideas behind the Rise of Skywalker. And here's the thing: it is a good book so far. I am actually going to give it a positive review on the podcast more than likely, but because it's so good, it frustrates me in a really bizarre type of way. But I'm not going to
Yeah.
spoil that.
No, that's fair. But So Nate, what are some of your other favorite moments? I have some other things I want to mention, but definitely want to give you the floor.
Well, for starters, I love some of the voice acting that they have here. Um, they actually, they actually have a lot of big names that do voice acting here. Like, for example, the guy who voices Kanan is Freddie Prinze Jr., who he's actually kind of a big actor. He had his own show for like 2 years, and I think some younger audiences will know he played Fred in those two really bad live action Scooby Doo movies.
Hmm.
Um, and he's also married to the actress who plays the main character in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. The funny thing is that we have a bunch of characters from Star Wars. Like Darth Vader makes a lot of appearances. We have a like one or two episodes where Lando appears, which I really loved it when Lando appears. Lando was one of my favorite characters in the original trilogy, and I
Yeah.
always love it when he comes back. C3PO and R2 appear, and what's funny is that now with C3PO being voiced by Anthony Daniels, that's not as impressive because believe it or not, Anthony Daniels has voiced C3PO in literally everything. He's voiced C3PO in every video game that 3PO has appeared in. He voiced him in the
Yeah.
Droids cartoon. He voiced him in the Clone Wars cartoon. But here's the thing: Darth Vader. Every single scene that Darth Vader is in Rebels, he's voiced by James Earl Jones, who
Yeah.
voiced him originally, and Lando is voiced by Lando himself, Billy D. Williams. I just love that because it like
It gives
because
some continuity.
mm-hmm. Like especially with like I know it doesn't happen this season. I'm gonna have a lot more really cool moments to talk about next season, but like having Ahsoka talk to Darth Vader with James Earl Jones's voice, like this is like wow, this is taking a character from from the TV shows and having her talk to a guy
Yeah.
who's using the same voice from the movies. Like I don't think people really understand just how big of a connection, like how big that is just to like connect the shows and the movies together.
Oh yeah. And there's also one of my favorite voice actors in all of anime from the English side
Mm-hmm.
in this season, well, in the series overall, and that's Steve Bloom, the voice of Zeb.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Bloom is probably better known for his role as Spike from Cowboy Bebop.
Mm-hmm.
He has a couple of other roles, like he's Tom from Toonami Tom. So there's a lot of big things that he's done as well, and this is another really big feather in his cap to be able to do a Star Wars thing.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I remember you and and Abby talking about how you knew him a little bit when you guys were here in Atlanta.
yeah, no, we've had Steve around New Orleans a couple of times for MechaCon, and there's been some good memories there. But that's a podcast for another time.
But yeah, I mean, I'm so it's been a while. Like I don't remember everything from season one because I'm still watching the show for the first time. But I would probably say that my favorite moment is probably still the whole episode where Ezra finds his kyber crystal and like Ezra's trial. That's probably
Yeah.
what I'm going to say is my favorite moment.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite things. I also enjoyed. It's kind of silly, but if you know me at all, I am a huge R2D2 fan. Like that's my man. That's my droid right there. Like no other droid comes close to my love for R2D2.
Hmm.
Second would be Chopper, honestly. But seeing Chopper and R2D2 interact in that episode was pretty fun as well, and I gotta say, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I kind of want to pivot here, Nate, a little bit towards what season one is kind of going for and what it's about, because we've been kind of hinting at it here and there a little bit. But the idea is Ezra is found by the rebels. Um, he's brought along against his will for a mission, and he learns he likes what he's doing, and then they figure out he's a Jedi, And the remainder of the season is just leading up to, in part, Ezra learning to become a Padawan, while also us world building a little bit to give us the sparks of rebellion. I love that title for that episode. That's a really good
Yeah,
title. Um, in fact, it might actually end up being the podcast title.
go for it.
So, so yeah, I just think there's a lot of good stuff here with the fact that this is an origin story for Ezra, but it's also an origin story for the rebellion that we're going to come to know in the original trilogy.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of great setup here. Like, yeah, there's a lot of faults with the season. I'll be the first to admit it, but I think the overall setup we get here is pretty dang good.
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I think people criticize it for being a little bit more episodic, which I get what they're coming from, because even the first season of Clone Wars was very Clone Wars is not an episodic show.
Right.
There's multiple episodes that cover like an ongoing story arc, and then they move on to the next big story arc. Um I can understand that, but I don't know. I feel like if it copied Clone Wars a little too much, it, it like you wonder why they even bothered just canceling Clone Wars and just kept making that show. So I'm
Well,
cool with.
they probably canceled because of the contractual obligations with Cartoon Network,
Hmm.
and then Netflix tried to save it for half a season, and then Lucas sold the IP to Disney. So that was assumedly the end of Clone Wars when Disney bought it. The fact that Disney made another season after, that's pretty big.
Yeah,
Because typically you don't see a company that buys a product, continue some of the canon from prior in that
hmm,
way.
yeah. Um, I mean, do we want to talk about the faults of this season now before we do character
Yeah,
breakdowns, or?
I think so. You want to start off?
Yeah. So I feel like so I'll go into more detail when we go into like the character breakdowns. But now I personally enjoyed this season, but I kind of am afraid that I have to wonder, what if I didn't read A New Dawn and know, and not only just A New Dawn. What if I didn't read the book Lords of the Sith? I don't know if I mentioned this before, but
Mm-hmm.
Lords of the Sith is another book. It's mostly about Hera's father, like trying to stage something against Vader and Palpatine on Ryloth. So by reading that, I kind of have a little bit of idea of what Hera's life was like, even though Hera doesn't appear in that book. But they
Yeah.
established that that's her father. And what if I didn't read that book? And then what if I didn't read A New Dawn and pretty much know everything about Kanan? I'm kind of a I kind of wonder if maybe I wouldn't like this season as much, because I really like Kane and Hera, but that's because I know a lot about them from those books. Because here's the problem: I, right now, I think Sabine and Zeb are great characters. I really do. I like them both, but this season doesn't go into much detail on their backstories. We
Yeah.
don't know anything about Zeb or Sabine here,
Yeah.
and it doesn't help how neither one of them appear in A New Dawn. So I don't even know how these people like met up with Hera and Kanan. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a big deal. And I feel like if this season tried to go into more in detail about them, it would be fine. But the problem is that this show, it's a problem with a lot of Disney's Star Wars content, in my opinion, where it's I feel like season one of Rebels, and it gets better in seasons two, and 3 as far as I can tell, but season 1 they are way too dependent on bringing in familiar characters. Like
Yeah.
literally the very first scene of the debut episode, they bring in Darth Vader because everybody knows who Darth Vader is. And Darth Vader appears very frequently. There's an episode where there's a couple of episodes where Lando, who everybody knows who Lando is, will show up. They have to bring in C3PO and R2. Like, I just feel like this show doesn't feel confident enough in its own characters, and it feels the need to bring in other like characters that we already know in order to crutch it, because it's not just that. I mean, there's an episode where we see Yoda, we see Obi-Wan in a hologram giving his message. Like,
Well, I think the Obi-Wan thing is required here.
okay, that's fine, but I
I
mean,
definitely think the Obi-Wan thing is required regardless of the crutch it creates for us.
yeah, I can agree with that, but my bigger point is that, like, okay,
Yeah.
to kind of talk about a different Star Wars property, one of the reasons why I love the game Fallen Order, like why
Hmm.
I think Fallen Order is a great story, is because that game is like like that game. It's almost like somebody looked that game in the eye, like all this other Star Wars content, looked this game in the eye and say, we dare you to make people like you based on your own characters alone, not trying to bring in any nostalgia. And the game
Yeah.
is all like, okay, sure. And yeah, I mean, you've played Fallen Order a little bit, like,
Yeah, I'm on like chapter 4 or something right now.
and and there are some characters that you know, but they only make like brief cameos here and there. Like,
Yeah.
Fallen Order is determined to say, we are going to make you like us with these original characters that we created. We don't need Han Solo or Chewbacca or some other random dude to come in as a side character and just be a crutch for us.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's the opposite for Rebels.
And
That
see, counterpoint to what you're saying, because I don't have the same opinion you do there. My faults with Rebels is not that.
okay.
My counter to you is, like you said in the beginning of this podcast, Rebels is one of the first things Disney did
Mm-hmm.
once they bought the property.
Mm-hmm.
And Disney is probably at this point back then nervous, right? Like, they just bought the most iconic film franchise in all of history. And now they have to make it work and continue that legacy and you know, do the fans proud, basically.
Yep.
So there's a lot that they have to prove. They really do have to prove to the fans, to the world, that they are competent enough to have Star Wars under their umbrella. And part of that is being able to integrate stories of characters that we love. Like, you know, I personally have had questions of, so R2D2 and C3PO are, Anakin's dead. I mean, not dead, but
Yeah.
he's Vader now, but he can't have the droids anymore. Padme's literally dead. And the next time we see the droids after that scene where the babies are born is in A New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of leaves you wondering what happened in the middle. What have they been up to? So it's kind of seeing that answer of, okay, they're doing stuff for Bail Organa. They're doing missions for the rebellion without really knowing it. R2 knows about it, but C3PO has no idea what he's doing
Yeah.
because R2D2 has never had his memory banks wiped, and that's a whole other podcast we got to talk about one day. Because I have some thoughts on my man R2D2 here. Um,
And I like that little side thing, by the way, how they established that. Sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
I love how they established that Bale is a big piece of the of like the creation of the rebellion, because
yeah,
that's how it was in Legends too. In fact, he like I remember specifically in Legends during the Force Unleashed games that they established that like Bail and Amon Mothma, who was also a Republic senator, they established the rebellion, and because Bail is like a very wealthy man, he agrees, I will fund like 90% of the rebellion. So I
Yeah.
like how they remain a little true to the Legends continuity by having Bail be like a major contributor to the rebellion.
Yeah. So going back to my point, it's a nice nod to us as a fandom to get answers to questions that we're asking in what I consider an organic fashion. Like R2D2 and C3PO nonchalantly walk in. They have their story. They're not forced on us. I don't feel like they're throwing in my face and being like, "Look, it's the characters you love." It's more of a, "Oh hey, that's R2D2 and C3PO. What are they doing here? That's odd."
Mm.
So it's never like forced in your face. The same is true for Lando. I mean, that could have been any smuggler in the world that they ran into, but coincidentally, it is Lando, and it gives a little bit of insight into Lando before he is introduced in the original trilogy. And so I kind of liked these brief nods to history on both the prequel and in the original trilogy end of just bringing in characters in an organic fashion. I thought it worked pretty well, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, the
Um,
whole plot of Lando is that it was either Zeb or Sabine, I can't remember, but like one of them loses Chopper to Lando in a card game, and then
Zeb.
okay, yeah, Zeb's yeah, that seems like something Zeb would do, and
Well, Zeb and Ezra are in the bar gambling, and Zeb runs out of credit, so he's like, "Carapast, I'm gonna have to use the droid," and he does, and he loses the droid. But honestly, it works out for everyone because Chopper is really ingenious in that he stole the fuel, which was actually Lando's intention from the beginning.
yeah, and I mean, I think that works because in Star Wars you can't have a gambling scene without Lando.
Exactly. So again, I definitely agree with you that Disney went the safe route here by bringing in our nostalgia. But I have to disagree with you that it wasn't done well. I thought it was done really well. It's just they had no choice in the beginning of the franchise that they had to do something to let us kind of feel like we're still home, you know?
Hmm.
Because if you think about back then, like, when did Rebels come out? Like 2016, 2015?
The first season came out in 2014.
Okay, I'm off by 2 years. Cool. Um, at that point in time, Disney had just bought it. And I don't know how much you remember of this, Nate, but I remember quite a bit of the fandom back then. And the news that the Mouse bought Star Wars was not met with as much praise and hope as we have now, comparatively speaking. At that point, there was a lot of cries of, "Oh no, we're going to lose our beloved franchise. It'll become Mickey Mouseified. They're not going to know what to do with it. It'll be watered down. It'll be crap. This is the end of the franchise as we know it." Typical Star Wars fandom
Hmm.
garbage, right? But a very valid garbage in this case because it was an unknown entity. George Lucas is no longer the head behind everything. And we didn't have Dave Filoni and company really well known yet, I
Hmm.
mean, they did Clone Wars, but they weren't the powerhouse that they are today.
Yeah, I don't remember most people loving Dave Filoni. Like, I mean, I know people loved Clone Wars when it came out, but I don't know. I feel like Clone Wars is kind of looked upon, well, like, the hype around people loving Clone Wars even, came around like after Clone Wars had ended or something.
Well, so like we mentioned in our episode where we brought in my friend Zandru, so um, I didn't see Clone Wars until around the time that Disney bought the franchise.
Yeah, same here.
So yeah, it didn't do much for me when it was on Cartoon Network the first time because I didn't really care. I thought it was kind of weird that it was even a TV show for it because the prequels in my mind back then sucked. Little did I know that when I watched Clone Wars, I would love the prequels quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, all this to say that yes, they use the crutch. Yeah, it could have been different, but I think it did the job that the mouse intended.
Yeah, I can
And
agree with that.
I think that's what I think about that. But going into my faults with the season, I want to start by echoing we didn't really get a lot of Zev and Sabine background or development or anything. Um, but while that fault exists, I do want to paint the positives of Zev and Sabine here. The chemistry that they all have together as a unit is really powerful because you have Zeb and Ezra at odds ends all the time. You have Ezra making these really weak, flirtatious comments to Sabine, and Sabine kind of being in her own little world with the painting and the art and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so while we don't get a lot of depth to the characters, we do get a lot of personality, and I thought that was pretty well deserved because it made us like them. I mean, I don't know what you think, but I personally like the entire cast.
Oh, I can agree with that. Like, their family dynamic is what ultimately
Yeah,
drove it to me.
like if they were more like two-dimensional in their dynamics, I probably would not have finished Rebels back then.
Mm-hmm.
And just for the record, my current watch through of Rebels that I'm going through right now, Nate, is my third watch through completely.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I watched it originally when I was on Disney. I watched it again when I did my second binge of Clone Wars. When I finished Clone Wars the second time, I watched Rebels for the second time. So there's a bit of history there with me and Rebels that
Mm-hmm.
it left a really positive taste in my mouth. I personally loved it. But the other thing I didn't really care for, I felt like at points the plot was not well paced. Like at certain points at the end, we started getting a lot of plot, lot of plot, lot of plot, a lot of stuff is happening. Like Sabine starts questioning who Fulcrum is. Fulcrum's even mentioned as a thing, and to me that felt a little bit out of left field. I mean, yeah, we kind of knew ahead of time that you know Hera's getting missives from somewhere, but it's not really well established from where. And I don't know. I felt like the pacing there could have been a little bit better. Like maybe introduce Fulcrum a little bit earlier to build up that mystery more and do more with it. Aside from one episode where Fulcrum says, "Come to this planet, get this stuff. Oh, and by the way, there are these things that don't like the sun, but they're gonna try and attack you and eat you."
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I just think that they could have done a little bit more, a little bit earlier in the pacing there. But it's such a minor nitpick in my opinion. Like, it worked out in my opinion overall for the entirety of the series.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do wish that there was better pacing.
I think also one minor complaint I want to make. I know this is a nitpick, but here's the funny thing. I was when I was reading the Thrawn novel. Um, so Thrawn has a handful of characters that are going to appear in Rebels. Now that I didn't realize were characters in Rebels, like Arinda Price. Now, to be fair, Arinda Price isn't in a season one, so I'm okay with that. But the funny thing is that there's apparently a main villain in this season that left so big of an impact on me that she actually got mentioned in the Thrawn novel, and I and when I looked up to see to try to get an idea of what she looked like, I'm like, wait a minute, I've seen this character before. She's that important because I don't remember much. She was this administrator for the planet Lothal. She's this blonde haired girl named Marketh Tua. Do you remember her?
Not really.
Okay, yeah, because that's just a minor complaint I want to make because like for her to be mentioned in Thrawn, it's like okay, she has a big. She's supposed to be a big enough character to where I'm supposed to kind of know who she is already, and I don't. like,
Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't remember this at all, actually.
because like when I was reading Tarkin, that's another novel I'm going to be doing.
Yeah.
They mention a couple. They mention a couple of Imperial officers by name, and here's the thing: I know who those people are, even though they don't really do much. Like they mention they mention two of the Imperial officers that are in the Death Star meeting, like that one guy who says like Vader, you and your stupid force, and then Vader chokes him, and then like and then there's that other guy who's saying like guys, we need to do something. The rebels have the plans. They can kill us. Can we do something? That's another guy who
Nah.
was yeah, that was
Nothing can happen. It's
yeah,
all
that was
over.
yeah. The guy who gets choked by Vader is Admiral Mahdi, and the one who's warning everyone that the Death Star is vulnerable is Cassio Tage. I remember that, and then they also mention Moff Jerjerrod, who's the guy who later becomes the commander of the second Death Star in Return of a Jedi.
Hmm.
So, like, I know who those people are. So, Minister Tua, she's supposed to be like one of those people, where maybe I just remember her name. And oddly enough, even though she probably appears in a bunch of episodes of Rebels, like, she doesn't leave an impact for me to realize, like, oh, yeah, that was her. Like, I didn't even realize. Like, I went
Yeah.
back and looked at her picture because it seems like the book is like, hey, you should know who this person is. And I'm like, I don't. And I'm like, oh, wait, I did see her? Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. She was that person who. Wait, what did she do again? like, that was literally how she is. So yeah, that's just a minor nitpick I wanted to bring up, but I'm not
Yeah.
gonna. But she doesn't appear in any of the other seasons because I think she dies at the beginning of during the siege of Lothal and at the beginning of season 2. So, and the reason why I say I think is because she doesn't leave an impact. So,
Yeah.
like if I'm never going to get another complaint opportunity to complain about how forgettable she is until this podcast. So, yeah,
Nice.
just want to bring that up. Uh,
Do you want to move into the character breakdowns?
yeah, that'll be cool.
Okay. So I think start with Ezra.
Um,
What do you think of Ezra?
I don't think I hate him as much as other pieces of the fandom. I think he can be a little annoying at times, but I also I like the relationship he has with Kanan.
Hmm.
At least early on in this season. I'll talk more about the development that he goes through this season, but um, I feel like he's an interesting point of view character to kind of go through because I feel like he's the point of view character
Yeah.
for most people, which I think kind of makes sense because I think for at least season one of Rebels was trying really hard to appeal to kids. I mean, it's on
Oh yeah.
Disney XD for crying out loud. So I feel like having a little kid as like the point of view person is pretty cool. I, I'm still very curious to find out more about his parents, which I'm not. I hope that I get more answers in that in seasons 3 and 4. But I, yeah, um, I don't really remember much with Ezra from season 1 other than that, but I mean, I think he's fine. I mean, he's not a I don't hate him as much as other people do.
Hmm.
I don't think people hate him, but I think other people might like him too cuz most people hated Ahsoka in the first season of Rebels. So,
I
I
I liked Ezra. I mean, I Ezra to me, I'm gonna make a very ironic Disney reference here. Ezra's Aladdin.
Yeah, I mean,
E- Ezra is basically a street rat.
they
Heck,
call
he's
him a
even
street
called a
rat.
loaf rat.
Uh huh.
He's orphaned. He's been on his own. He steals to make his way through their life to eat and survive. He's Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I loved Aladdin as a character. And I think Ezra made for a really good intro character to the world we're being introduced to. Because Ezra, up until this point, had just been trying to survive, so he didn't really keep up with the history or whatever's going around, whatever's going on around him. Like, he didn't really care about the Empire, he didn't really care about what's happening in the world, or the galaxy, or the universe, or whatever. So, he's learning it alongside us, and that's really nice, I think.
By the way, I think it's fitting that you say that he's a lot like Aladdin, because there were people who were suggesting that the guy who plays Aladdin in the live action version that came out a couple of years ago should play live action Ezra in this
Yeah,
show. He's not playing him, which I think sucks because I like
I
that
know.
actor, but you know,
I mean, you
it's
win some, you
whatever.
lose some.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think he's annoying, but it's by design.
Hmm.
So I can't hate him for that.
I
He's
mean,
not annoying like Jar Jar Binks, who I don't like. He's annoying for the sake of character development later on that you'll see in season 4.
I mean,
Because there's a lot of stuff that happens later on at the end that really impacts Ezra's character that I'm not going to get into right now.
I would argue that Kid Anakin in the Phantom Menace is more annoying than he is.
I would argue Anakin, even in the second movie, is more annoying.
Yeah.
Anakin didn't get good in the prequel trilogies until the third one.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's a whole nother podcast. We're not going to get into this right now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so those are my thoughts on Ezra.
Yeah, I'll have more to say on Ezra after when we watch season 2, because I just finished season 2 a while ago, so it's a bit fresher on my mind.
Hmm.
But at least as far as like my opinion of Ezra for this season, I didn't hate him.
Yeah.
But he wasn't my favorite.
What do you think of Kanan?
I really liked Kanan. Kanan was my favorite character this first season. For starters, so I got really captivated by him when I read A New Dawn, and I don't think that this season goes into his backstory all
Mm-mm.
that much, but to me that wasn't necessary because I knew his backstory from A New Dawn,
Yeah.
and I really liked it. First of all, I love how they actually go through the trouble of giving him a former Jedi Master that is someone that I I personally knew from from a video game, and we actually see his old master in. I don't know if we see her in Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith, but I do remember seeing her in a non-speaking role in the Phantom
Yeah.
Menace in at least two shots. Her name is Depa Balaba.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so I really like that. I love how they have a character who some people who read some of the EU content would know, and they have her be his old master. Well, yeah. And so I really like that, and I know that's a little minor detail, but I just love it when they take these minor back. That's something I always love about this stuff, where they take these minor background characters who have no speaking roles, and then they flesh them out in expanded universe content. Like, for example, I don't think Plo Koon speaks a single line in any of the prequel movies, but he is a huge character in Clone Wars. And it's the same thing, having Deva Balaba, who we don't really know much about, have a Padawan. I know that's a bit of a tangent I just went on, but
Yeah.
that's always something I appreciated. I and I think I like Kanan here, but because I've seen how much he's moved past what he was in A New Dawn. Because, like I said in A New Dawn in my podcast, he's this former Jedi who just he doesn't really like the Force because his life got all screwed up. He's lost everything. He's going from job to job, and he likes to hit up the bars and hit on women. And
Yeah.
I liked him simply because I've seen how far he's come now, where he's regained his fighting spirit. The first scene where he uses his lightsaber was honestly like that was honestly amazing to me because I I don't want to spoil kind of a minor spoiler, but he's carrying his lightsaber all throughout A New Dawn, but he never wants to use it. And then, well, okay, a bit of a spoiler. He never uses it in A New Dawn. He decides that it's just not the right time. So to see him use it in that big moment, that it's already a cool moment just because people are like, "Ooh, he's a Jedi, that's awesome." But for me, seeing him do that, knowing what he's gone through in A New Dawn, and like everything that he's gone through from what I've read in A New Dawn, it hits me a bit
Yeah.
differently than it hits other people. So I I really liked Kanan. I liked seeing. He was the reason why I really enjoyed season one, because to see everything that he's gone through in A New Dawn and all the events prior, um, it it was satisfying to see that he's become more of this confident, still kind of a cowboy esque Jedi, where he uses a gun and like acts a bit more anti heroic, but he's also never been seduced by the dark side. Like, I like that. I really like that about him, and he is the reason why I kept coming back for season one, even though I had some issues with it.
Hmm. Yeah, Kanan in this season has a lot of mystery around him. Um, and I know even back then, when Kanan was introduced in Rebels, the first time, like when I watched the first time, and we had only had a handful of episodes, people were so focused, I felt like, about how did he survive Order 66.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that question tainted Kanan to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my best response comes from an article I read the other day where people have to realize 10,000 Jedi existed prior to Order 66. And, we have a couple of Jedi here and there to pop up that, survived. Ahsoka, Kanan, Kel. So we have a couple of people that pop up here and there, but it's just a handful. And to me, the Empire, as good as they were, they can't get 100%. There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally think that argument of Kanan's character being bad back then is kind of garbage, because Kanan, you can feel in season one Kanan's uncertainty, Kanan's pain. Um, I have thought, rewatching it, did Kanan feel guilt for surviving when everyone else didn't survive, and that's what drove him to
Mm-hmm.
kind of give up the Force in the Jedi way. So I kind of think there's a lot to his character and the subtlety of it, because yeah, he survived, but he has immense guilt. And then he meets Ezra, and he sees a chance to redeem himself and wash away some guilt and bring a new hope to the franchise. Pun intended.
And he probably gets inspired from like Obi-Wan's
Yeah.
speech, because at the very end of that speech in the holocron, Obi-Wan says, "A new hope shall reveal itself."
Yeah, so Kanan has the inspiration there to do that. And yeah, there's an episode where I forget what Jedi Master they were trying to find. Um,
Luminara unduly.
there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
Unduli. So they're trying to find Jedi Master Unduli, and Kanan kept saying, "Oh, Ezra, you'll have a much better teacher because you can learn way more from her." But Ezra takes that as Kanan doesn't want me. Kanan thinks I'm a screw up. He's trying to pawn me off on somebody else. But Kanan's actually feeling the same thing of how can Ezra want me to be his teacher when I don't even feel like I'm worthy to be a teacher? Because technically, Kanan's not a Jedi Knight. He's just a Padawan trainer at that point.
Yep.
By Jedi Council law. Now, of course, we can argue he's a knight because of what he does and what he's capable of, but if you go strictly by Jedi accordances, he was still a Padawan.
Mm-hmm.
So he wore the title of Padawan and internalized it, and that's what he dealt with, and that's what he was kind of, you know, feeling. He felt inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about favorite scenes earlier. Another scene I really liked was that heart to heart between Ezra and Kanan, where they both admit that they like each other a lot. They feel that bond, but they are both scared of letting the other one down. I thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And that's probably my favorite Kanan moment in season one. The other one being him dual blading with Ezra's lightsaber in his own,
Yeah.
and showing Ezra how to use a gun lightsaber the right way. So, no, I think Kanan was done pretty well.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like it never bothered me that he survived Order 66 because, first of all, even the legends established that a lot of Jedi survived Order 66.
Yeah.
Like, I mean that's literally the whole plot of the first Force Unleashed game, where
Mm-hmm.
Vader's secret apprentice is going around killing a bunch of old Jedi. Like, I mean, which ironically enough, I think that's where they got the inspiration for the Grand Inquisitor from. But we'll get to him when we get to him.
Yeah.
But and not only that, but the book does a decent job at explaining how he survived Order 66 as well. Like now we're gonna see how he survives later on. We saw how he survived Order 66 at the beginning of the Bad Batch
Yeah.
cartoon, all of which is weird because there's a few things that kind of contradict what happened in that book. Like in the book describes like both he and Depa were ambushed and she like force pushed him away or something and told him to run, and then he literally saw her get gunned down before he ran away, which that that to me was also a very powerful thing. So yeah, I'll admit maybe my love for Kanan in this season is mostly off of what I read in the book and just knowing more about his backstory. But I mean, the book came out before a month before the TV show came out, so everyone had a chance to read it before Rebels came out. So I mean, I I don't think that's a downside, actually. I mean, I think it's perfectly fine that I'm just going off what I think about with the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like Kanan came out and then they decided to build this new backstory for him after the show came out. Like,
Yeah.
so, yeah,
No, that's part of the Disney plan, I think.
yeah. So I'm perfectly fine with just standing by a lot of like what I say about Kanan is like based off of the book. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's perfectly fair, to be honest.
Yeah. So moving on to Hera, if you don't mind, because I do want to talk about Hera
Yeah,
now.
of course. I think we're done with
Um,
Kanan.
yeah. So Hera, to me, from the main Rebel cast that we get through season one, while she had more of a relationship with Kanan and she was a leader and all that, I feel like she had. I don't want to say she had less personality and less development than some of the others in terms of character development,
Mm-hmm.
but she felt like she was just there to be a mother figure to these guys and the hard ass commander. Like she didn't really get into it with the other characters all that much, unless it was to discipline people or to talk them into doing the mission at hand. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt like that hurt Hera a little bit. Now, I feel like you have a different opinion because you read the book and
Mm-hmm.
she gets a lot more development from that. But Hera gets good, but Hera was not my favorite in this season because I felt like I didn't really see her personality come out to play.
I can kind of agree. Pardon me. I can kind of agree with what you're saying because, like, one of the reasons why I like Kanan is not just because I read from the book, but it's because I feel like the character that I see in Rebels builds off what I read in A New Dawn. It's a little different with Hera though, because like in the book, Hera is, this like, she's like this real, like, hard, kind of badass. There's a lot of moments where she likes to kind of use her good looks to, like, hit on men and get information out of it, which we don't see any of that in Rebel season one, not as much as I can remember. Like, honestly, the motherly role that she plays seemed a little bit at odds with like this, freedom fighter that I saw in A New Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
I I still like. So I'm actually going to kind of agree with you that I feel like I really liked Hera in the book that I read, but I feel like her motherly personality and not getting enough time to shine, I feel like that's a little bit at odds with the character that I read in the book.
It is. I
So,
mean, I haven't read the book, but I've read enough about it to know what it's about, basically.
mhm.
And I definitely see the contradiction there between character.
And I feel like she's expanded upon a lot more in, like, especially in season two. Like, I love her
Mm-hmm.
in season two, especially with the moments with her dad and everything.
Yeah. I mean,
I
there's a lot of great moments there that we can get into next podcast, but
Yeah, she's gonna go on to be a really good character. I feel like as time goes on, like, this is just who she's developed into, and
yeah.
to be fair, maybe I could buy her like flirty, like, like personality. Like, maybe that's gone down a little bit since she's kind of met Kanan and they kind of have a little bit of a thing going on. But so I can kind of accept that, but yeah, can't Hera. I still liked her, but she was a little. There were times where I was watching her and I was literally scratching my head, like, wait, like this isn't the maybe this is the same person that I read, and I just kind of got a different idea of her from the book. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bit of stuff at odds with how she was done in the
Yeah.
book, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. I agree with you on that 100%.
Hmm.
Um, so moving on to my man Zeb, who probably stole season one for me.
Hmm.
He was probably my favorite character from season one on, and he is just hilarious. So he tries to act all tough and badass and gruffy and whatever, and but he's also more caring than he wants to admit, and I thought that was pretty cool for him. Um, he also has a lot of great like relationships with Ezra and Chopper, where 9 out of 10 times you can see Zeb running around the ship either after Ezra or after Chopper or after both of them.
Hmm.
There's always some kind of conflict to be watching. There's never a dull moment. And like my favorite thing that Ezra and Zeb did was steal a Tie Fighter and hide it away in the freaking cave for the entirety of the season until they're like, oh, we can probably use this to get Kanan back. Let's go do that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And I don't know, I think his relationship with Ezra is very strong. So in the first episode, we think, oh, Zeb's going to hate him. They're not going to get along. But there's a mutual respect building between the two of them that neither one wants to really admit, but it's definitely there.
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts on Zeb. Is that hilarious, snarky, and just personality is amazing. Steve Bloom did a masterful job with this character, I feel like.
I really liked Zeb too. I think he's um, if I remember correctly, I think he's the first major um, Lasat. Lasat, that's the name of his alien species. Like Lasats are some of the most interesting alien species that I've looked at, especially with the backstory that we learn about from him in the next season. Not only
Yeah.
that, but there's also another really cool Lasat that we meet in Fallen Order. I don't want to spoil that for Riz,
Hmm.
but so I like that. Because I don't, and I think Lasats, like, I don't remember them appearing at all in Legends. So I think Lasats are like one of the first big, like, alien creations for Disney. Either that or they just completely redesigned them. Because, like, all the other ones, like, like Twi'leks, Hera, there's a bunch of Twi'leks that were in Legends.
Yeah.
Same thing with, like, Togradas, which is Ahsoka's alien species, and etc. But, so I like that. And yeah, I mean, I mean, I can't say much about Zeb in this because, I mean, we don't know about his backstory. We'll learn more about like half the people's backstories that we don't know about starting in season 2.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, like, how could you not like Zeb? Because, he's just this tough guy who spews a lot of deadpan jokes. And even if you don't like the show, well, here's the funny thing: you can still relate to Zeb because half the time Zeb is talking as if like he doesn't want to be there. I mean, if you don't like Rebels, don't you not want to be there? Then you can relate
Yeah.
to Zeb. So, yeah, Zeb is cool. He's just one of those guys that you can't hate.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So, do we want to move on to Sabine next?
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to look up who Sabine's voice actor is right now because I feel like I know her. So you can go and start off while I read up on this real quick.
Sabine, um, so I like her a lot more now that I've seen season 2 and I'm midway through season 3, but if I'm gonna be honest, I thought she was a little boring this season. I don't remember her doing much. It actually took me a minute to remember her name, and mainly the only reason that I kind of remembered her name was because her name sounds similar to Satine,
Mm-hmm.
and they're both Mandalorians, so it makes sense why they would have similar names. So,
So, did you not find amusement with the little antics that Sabine did during season one?
oh, I was amused when she painted that TIE fighter. That was really funny. I did like
Um,
that.
what about when she painted the mural of Ezra falling on Zeb on the bunk bed?
Yeah, that was pretty funny now that I remember it. I
Yeah, I
thought
mean,
that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say there's some stuff that Sabine does in season one, but a lot of what she does is really subtle. I felt, and it's not really well fleshed out until later,
But
like a later season. I mean,
but I'll give her a little bit of credit. I'll say this, that like she's like, so if we're gonna look at them as a family, which is what I did legitimately look at these people as by seasons in, you can say that like Hera and Kanan are the
Kanan,
dad and
the
mom,
parents.
yeah, the parents, and I guess like Zeb is like the oldest, he's the big brother, and he likes to pick on the littler ones. And if you want to consider Ezra the baby, I feel like Sabine is like the bigger sister of the two, where she likes to get
Yeah.
into antics with them. And I feel like her relationship with Ezra was pretty good. It's not at the same as Zeb, where Zeb is just like, oh my god, Ezra's here again. Like, it's more
Well,
like,
Sabine's juggling the idea of trying to be big sister to him while he's crushing hard on her.
Right.
So it is a weird dynamic, but I think there's something to be said about her subtle humor throughout, where she'll nonchalantly say, I can do something about this. And then she goes off and paints a whole mural depicting a random one off scene just to get a laugh out of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's something we see more of her as we go through um, her Mandalorian background in later seasons, because her background by the end of season 4, oh my god, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly want her to come back in Mandalorian, but she didn't.
Didn't Zeb come back from Mandalorian
Yes,
season 3?
he did.
Yeah. So Zeb comes there, but not Sabine. That's just weird.
And quick tangent, because we haven't had a tangent in a while. Have I told you I've interviewed Taylor Gray, the voice of Ezra?
I don't think you did. No.
So we've interviewed him on the website before, and one of my things that I was kind of disappointed with, and I kind of knew it wasn't going to happen, but I really wanted Taylor Gray to play Ezra on the live action, because that dude was amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Looking at him right here, yeah. I think he could get away with that.
I mean, he looked the part.
I mean, are you also disappointed that Ashley Eckstein? I always forget how her name is, but Ahsoka's voice actress doesn't play live action Ahsoka.
I can see why.
I mean, I'm cool with the actress that they have playing live action Ahsoka. I love Rosario Dawson. I've seen her in a lot of things. Rosario Dawson is awesome. So I'm all for her playing Ahsoka. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know. I also follow Ashley Eckstein on Instagram, and she just seems really cool. So
Yeah.
I would like for her to potentially play it, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Some of these people who voice their characters, I feel like would be great to play them in live action.
I mean, it's just a continuity thing for me at this point. But I have no doubt that whoever is playing Ezra in the new incarnation will be great.
Yeah.
Just like I think the new Ahsoka character is doing pretty good.
I mean, for people who think like, hey, I mean, just because they voice them doesn't mean that they can't play them well. I mean, Katie Sackhoff voiced Bo-Katan in Clone Wars and then would go on to play her in live action in The Mandalorian.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my thoughts on Sabine, is that she didn't get a whole lot to do, but her character traits are definitely being fleshed out in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And the foundations are laid for the future.
And I think that it has a really great future because now I actually really like Sabine.
Yeah.
In fact, to be honest, at this point where I am in the show, there's not a single character I can say I dislike in Rebels.
Yeah.
But,
No, I don't have one either. I can't think of one.
But we'll get to those more epic moments when we get to them in seasons 2 and 3.
Yeah, and 4.
Yeah.
Chopper. My man Chopper. Played by frickin' Dave Filoni of all people.
Oh, Dave Filoni voices Chopper? Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome. I didn't know that. That is awesome.
They don't credit him until the final episode, I think.
Okay, well, I'm all for that.
Yeah, Chopper is... Okay, this is going to sound bad, but it's not meant to be bad. Chopper is Walmart R2-D2. Like, he has the same personality traits as R2-D2. He's quirky, he's sarcastic, he's playful, and all that stuff, but he also knows how to get down to business to get the job done when he has to in his pinch.
Yeah.
And I think later on we get some more background on Chopper, and it's pretty great.
Yeah.
And I just love the fact that he's an astromech with arms.
Yeah, the arms part has always been really funny.
Like he's so expressive because he has arms, and I find it hilarious.
I guess the only thing I can mention about Chopper that, aside from what you've mentioned, is like the funny thing is, I thought for a second that that he may have been a droid that we see like roll pat like okay, I don't know how many people remember this. I mean, I just remember this stuff because I'm one of those people, and not everybody is going to remember this, but like during the scene on A New Hope, in A New Hope, where Obi-Wan uses the mind trick on the stormtrooper in on
Hmm.
Tatooine, there's an R5 unit. Remember, R5
Yeah,
droid units are ones that have like the not the dome shaped heads, but ones that like are like pot shaped or something.
cylindrical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one that has like an orange head that looked just like Chopper with like a white body that rolls past. And for a second, wait a minute, could that be Chopper? But it
Oh
turns out that
Lord.
it's not, because Chopper is actually apparently supposed to be significantly smaller than like R5 and R2 units.
Hmm.
So kind of sucks, but yeah, I know that's just a
Well,
little fun fact that I wanted to bring up. But
this might be a slight spoiler, but it's not going to be a spoiler because you don't know what I'm talking about yet.
uh-huh.
But we do find out in season 4 the location of people during A New Hope. So that's a good way to disprove
Yeah.
that was Chopper.
Well, but also, like, why would he just be wandering around on Tatooine at that point anyway? So,
Because Tatooine is a place where everyone ends up at some point that's major to the Star Wars universe.
dude. But also, doesn't he appear in Rogue One in the background?
Yes, he does.
Okay, then that already disproved that.
Yeah.
Then I kind of already have an idea where he was around that time. He was on
Yep.
Yavin with the other
Yep.
people. So yeah, that's not even a spoiler for me actually.
Well, there's more to it, but we'll get into that when we get to season 4.
Yeah,
Um,
and also I'm
yeah,
pretty sure the ghost appears in the at one
yes.
point in the background. Okay,
Yep.
yeah. Well, Rogue One came out after Rebels was around,
Hmm.
so I'm pretty sure people loved that.
Oh, dude, the fandom ate it up. It was so great.
Mm.
Um, okay, so we got two more characters to talk about here, and they're on the villain side.
Hmm.
So the first one is Agent Callus, and I'm gonna start off with the quick. I don't necessarily care all that much about Callus just yet.
Hmm.
He's fine. He serves the purpose of like being the foil to the rebels,
Hmm.
but there's nothing to him yet, really.
Yeah, he's not really memorable.
Yeah.
Like say what you will about Clone Wars, but they had a lot. Like there were a lot of antagonists that literally just by reading their names in the books, I could remember them. Like I remember Admiral Trench from the first episode. I remember, of course, I remember Cad Bane. Um, I, um, I, and if you don't remember who Asajj Ventress is, then you need to,
You've never watched Clone
yeah.
Wars.
Um,
Um,
but
yeah, but Callus just didn't do a lot
yeah, because
yet.
I'm pretty sure Callus appears in a couple of episodes of the Bad Batch, and I'm starting to think like, wait, he appears in the Bad Batch, right? Like, shouldn't I? Shouldn't I be having like this big fanboy moment, like, oh my god, there's the guy from Rebels, oh my god? But no, I'm not having it, and maybe I'll like him a lot more by season
Well,
4. I kind of
there,
like him a little bit more now that I know what he's about, but
I think I think you might have already been through the scene, but we'll talk about it offline. But there's a lot of build up with him later on,
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if it's season 3 or 4, but his character does improve quite a bit. I will say that right now.
Yeah.
But as of right now, he's very boring.
And when I was watching this second season of Bad Batch, which is where I think he appears, that was when I don't even think I had started season 2 of Rebels. So, I mean, that's how little of an impact the guy had on me.
Yeah. So moving on to the final one here, we got the Grand Inquisitor, who is also known as Jason Isaacs,
Mm-hmm.
who, for those of y'all who live under a rock, he has a lot of credentials to his name outside of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
For example, he is Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter series.
Yep.
He is Captain Hook in Peter Pan from 2003.
Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah, I remember that.
Um, he is in so many movies and so many things.
Didn't he voice a character in Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Admiral Zhao in
Yeah.
Last Airbender. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that
And the
was.
second season of Korra, he was back again. Yeah, so he's been around.
And I like that. I honestly kind of wish that Jason Isaacs played him in Kenobi, because he actually appears in Kenobi as well in a
Yeah.
slightly smaller part. Which, yeah, that kind. If you've seen Rebels, then that kind of spoils that he's going to survive when Reva stabs him in
Hmm.
Kenobi, which was kind of weird.
Yeah.
And that should and I think he left a bigger impact on me, because, like, I remember when I saw him in Kenobi after I had finished Rebel season 1. I actually remember, oh yeah, that's the main bad guy from season 1 of Rebels. So
That's the guy.
yeah, so he left a bigger impact on me. Like, he's a pretty cool person. I recognize what species he is too. He's an Utapowan.
Hmm.
So, which was cool. I was able to recognize that immediately. So, I like he had a very intimidating presence to him in this show, and like every time he shows up and Kanan and Ezra have to fight him, like I think like, oh man, this is a really,
This is
like,
it. Yeah.
yeah, this is huge. So he left a much bigger impact on me in than Callus, to the point where when he does show up in Kenobi, I'm like, oh yeah, he's from Rebels. I've seen him before.
Yeah.
And part of me even wants to think, oh wait, I've seen this guy in Rebels. This is a big deal. So,
Yeah.
like, and I didn't have like a huge fanboy moment, like, oh my god, it's the Grand Inquisitor, because he's not a character I love or anything, but he's someone where he strikes me with the presence where when he shows up, things are pretty serious.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I don't have much else to say about the Grand Inquisitor. You've said pretty much all the important things about him, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I mean, if he's voiced by Jason, and maybe it's just because he's voiced by Jason Isaacs. Jason Isaacs is probably one of my favorite actors. Like, I've seen him in a lot of things. Like, I love him
yeah.
as Lucius Malfoy. Plus, he seems like a really nice guy when he's not acting, which is hilarious because of the people that he plays
Oh,
90% of the
absolutely.
time. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So, I'm ready to give overall thoughts and a score here.
okay.
Um, I think Rebels had a really good first season. It's not spectacular, it's not phenomenal, it's just really good. Um, I think Rebels spends a lot more time setting up season 2 than being its own season 1. And a lot of that is due to the fact that, like we said earlier, Disney is experimenting with how to do the Star Wars franchise in their own way. But I don't think this is a bad season.
Mm-hmm.
I would end up giving this an 8, I think.
I might give it a slightly lower score. It took me a while for me to get into this, but now I will say that the episode where they try to go after Luminara unduly, that was when I kind of started to get a lot of respect for it, because I remember Luminara Unduli as a background character
Hmm.
um, from Attack of the Clones, and I remember I think she only appears in like one major episode of Clone Wars, where she and Barriss Offee have to
Yep.
fight alongside Anakin and Ahsoka. Um,
Hmm.
and when I saw that, I'm like, okay, these people know their Star Wars history and they know these side characters enough, and and that's a personal thing that I always respect, when you're able to bring in like side characters, like, you know who they are and you acknowledge who they are. So when they brought in Luminara and Dooley, that's when I realized, okay, these people respect history of Star Wars, and they're not just going to bring up some like random new character.
Yeah.
Like, so that's when I realized, like, this has a respect for the history of what's established in Star Wars. And I started to like it a lot more after that. And I really loved the last episode with them saving Kanan from the Empire. And um, so I'm not going to give it an 8, because I do have issues with it, but I did want to continue it. And the
Yeah.
big reveal of Ahsoka, even though it was a little undermined for me because I had seen the last season of Clone Wars,
Hmm.
I still enjoyed it. And again, maybe a lot of maybe one of the reasons why this season sits well with me a bit better is because I read A New Dawn before it, so I'm and not many fans read the books, which is perfectly fine, but I do, so maybe that's why this season also sit well with me. So I'm
Yeah.
going to give it a 7.5. I had
Okay.
some issues with it, but I don't know. I mean, if I have to go back and watch it again, I'll be perfectly fine doing that.
Yeah. No, definitely. I can see that.
And again, maybe it's just because I read the book, but again, everyone had a chance to read the book before the show came out, because the book came out a month before the show premiered. So,
Yeah.
I mean, for some people are just like that, and even though I didn't technically do it in the at the same time as some other people would have done it, I am one of those people that that decided to read the book and then got intrigued to watch the show and then liked it,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
No, totally. I get it.
Hmm.
Well, that's. I think that's the wrap, huh?
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to talking about season 2, because I got a lot of things to say about that. A lot of positive things, by the way.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to my rewatch season 2 starting tomorrow.
Hmm. So with that said, this was our little review of Star Wars Rebel season 1. We will try to get to season 2 as soon as we can. This will be the big things that we're going to be talking about until we get to Ahsoka, you know, just for the build up, and then we'll probably try to do the Clone Wars series after that. Well, not
Or
try.
the
We're
original
going.
trilogy.
Yeah, yeah. We should
Yeah, that
probably
we should
one
probably
of
work
those
on that.
things.
Yeah.
But with that,
We'll figure it out.
yeah. But again, we do want to stress that we are doing these reviews not in support of the Hollywood. We are doing this to show our support for the actors that we've come to know and love, who have made this universe, Star Wars universe that we love, possible through their hard work, and we support them 100% in their endeavors right now. We love all of them, and we love the writers. We want to make that clear. With that said, we will see you guys next time when we take a look at Star Wars Rebels Season 2. But until that time, guys, you all stay safe. We love you, and may the Force be with you.